The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on DEA Pharmaceutical Regulations. My name is Sasha, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I just want to give you a brief overview on what today's webinar is going to entail, as well as an introduction on our speaker. Today's webinar will start with a slideshow presentation by our in-house expert, Mike Albert. This webinar will give you expert insight onto what the new DEA pharmaceutical regulations mean for your organization. This webinar will address how pharmaceutical disposal and drop-off rules could impact your organization and what you should do to stay compliant. All regulations will be presented in an easy-to-understand, digestible form so that you can take the information back to the rest of your organization. At the end of this webinar, there will be an open Q&A. You can ask questions by typing them into your chat pane on the right where it says questions. No need to raise your hand or anything like that. You can just type them right in there and I will ask the questions to Mike. All unanswered questions will be answered and sent out in an email after the presentation. In addition to the questions, all attendees will receive a recording of the presentation and a copy of the deck used today. Today's speaker, Mike Albert, has worked at Triumvirate Environmental for over 6 years and currently holds the title of Onsite Services Operations Manager. Over 3 of those years, he spent specializing in healthcare operations and has first-hand experience complying with and staying up to date on DEA regulations. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad that everybody could make it. We like to start off with a little blizzard that we are dealing up here in New England, but I wanted to make sure that we are all getting out to you and reaching out to you for what we can do. This is a nice picture of my car that we all get to dig out up in the New England area, but obviously we are reaching out far further than this, and hopefully the snow has not impacted you as much as it is up here as well. But everybody's safe and warm, and we're good to go. So on to what we're actually talking about today. We're going to talk about the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, the new final rule that went into effect last year on September 9th, 2014. It specifically addresses controlled substances, the disposal of the controlled substances. It's part of the 21 CFR Parts 1300, 1301, 1304 et al. So it continues to go on from there. There were multiple revisions based off of the CSA, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, many years ago, and it took a long time to get to this point. But with over 1.5 million registrants who can adapt and actually obtain controlled substances, they wanted to get it right. Considering all the timestamps, the costs, and other regulations, there's over 25 different pages of questions and answers to the new regulation that they actually put in there. It's a great reference, and you can most likely find a lot of your questions that hopefully don't get answered from here, but hopefully we can answer everything for you and move on from there. What I wanted to start off with is our key message. The collection, destruction, and removal of controlled substances is now more protected, widespread, and sustainable. The objective of this new and final rule is to make sure that there are more and easier options for collection of controlled substances throughout the nation. The DEA found that there were many loopholes within the regulation and that they wanted to make sure that everything was fixed. They wanted to continue on their path of diverting less of the controlled substances into the wrong hands and divert them into the correct hands for proper disposal when they were done. They wanted to be able to have less paperwork, a less burdensome task of every registrant out there to make sure that they get things done quickly, efficiently, and in the right direction. There's multiple new options now to help your community to be safer, to become what's called an authorized collector, which we're going to talk about. And the less regulation on how to get rid of the actual controlled substances in many cases has pulled the burden off the registrants for waiting for such a long time to hold on to these drugs when they're expired to be able to get rid of them in the process. So there's more specific rules to follow, but hopefully it's a lot easier. Who's this for? The ultimate end users. The people who lawfully obtain controlled substances, this is you and me. This is where and when they can dispose of unused and wanted substances. It talks about how we can get rid of them on a normal day-to-day basis, and we don't have to wait for the take-back days that happen once, twice, maybe 3 times a year, depending on your community and what law enforcement agencies are around. It directs directly to the registrants that are out there. Registrants fall under retail pharmacies, hospitals, clinics, manufacturers, distributors, reverse distributors, and narcotic treatment centers, and also long-term care facilities that are out there as well. So registrants are a very wide range of group within the U.S. that the DEA wants to be able to regulate properly on these substances. Reverse distribution is definitely one of the easiest ways to dispose of controlled substances, but they defined it a little bit better in here to make sure that everybody was following the right rules and making sure that there was more limitations on exactly what needed to be done. Becoming a collector for a registrant is safer for the community. It potentially has a safety and security and a small cost for the disposal of this, but we're going to get into this a little bit. Just a few thoughts to think about. Then the waste and disposal side, there's always this quote-unquote no dumping policies, especially in districts that have wastewater policies to make sure that a lot of these substances cannot go down the drain. When you collect and then you waste and dispose, there's burdensome time and risk with too much documentation before. Now it's definitely easier. There's more options out there. Regionally, they're trying many different ways to actually pull this regulation into focus to make sure that everybody is on the same page and everybody gets the same assistance moving forward. However, they're all learning as they go as well. As I mentioned, this regulation just got released at the end of last year, the last quarter of 2014, the first quarter of the fiscal year 2014 for a lot of people, and the regional agencies are still trying to get a handle on everything to make sure that everything is going well. So with that, I'd like to move on to a little poll statement just to make sure everybody's here for approximately the same reason, which is definitely a good thing to talk about this new regulation that's out there. How often do you worry about proper controlled substances handling and disposal at your institution? A lot of times there's a bunch of different groups that never have to think about this. This is not on their plate. However, there are a lot of us out there that we talk about this probably daily, if not all the time. You'll go to bed having nightmares about it, and it'll almost never go away. So it's one of those things that we really look for. We help out a lot of people that need guidance on this as well. There are many registrants out there that don't want to do the wrong thing and make sure that they're following the right protocols, the procedures to make sure it's all there. And then everybody wants to do the right thing because they want to be able to make this world a better place for the environment, and that's exactly what the DEA is trying to do, is get it out of the environment. So it's another policy to review. It's definitely something to understand and move forward with. So thank you very much for that. And what we're going for today, what you're going to learn today, what is an ultimate end user and what is non-retrievable. These are two new terms that are used in the DEA controlled substance regulation to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Understanding what registrants are capable of providing to the public. There are certain things that registrants can do and certain things that registrants can't. However, this new regulation really opens up the options. There's definitely required paperwork and documentation. They even made the new DEA Form 41 that a lot of people are very familiar with when they have to handle controlled substances. We're going to go into this. And then also knowing how to properly dispose of controlled substances from your institution. So there's many different options, new legal options, innovative options. Knowledge is really power, and power can equal safety within your institution as well. So it's something you definitely want to consider. What you also might be thinking, can I really destroy controlled substances on my site? Is it as easy as the new rule actually states? Do all DEA agencies have to follow this regulation? The real answer is yes, because it's a federally mandated regulation. However, as I mentioned earlier, every regional office is really trying to keep up and understand with what's going on, and they're asking a lot of questions that I'm sure you are and we all were at one point as well. Is this a safe and responsible direction to go towards, and does the cost outweigh the benefit? There's definitely a cost in collecting and disposing. However, your unique setting and the way you're going to collect or possibly collect could either not have any cost to you or have a very low cost but benefit your institution and do it safely and securely as well. Some of the benefits of collection, what a lot of people say and what it was before, is if we become a collector, we'll have much more unwanted attention at our institution. Potentially, a collector could have more unwanted attention from your community, but controlled substances will be collected and taken out from illegal use. The collector is what they're going to call an authorized collector, that I'm going to go into detail in a little bit, but you actually have a location with your institution that you can collect community unwanted controlled substances and be able to get them out of diversion, get them out of the environment, and get them into a safer place. So there's definitely some things to consider. However, they laid out a lot of guidelines that should make it a little bit easier than what a lot of people are thinking right now. Letters still need to be sent to the special agent in charge, the SAC, for authorization for destruction and disposal of controlled substances. What the new regulation states is letters do not have to be written to the SAC for approval of destruction. However, new practices will need to meet the new definition of non-retrievable. We're going to go over exactly what non-retrievable means, and before, this was heavy in research and manufacturing, in a lot of different pharmaceutical companies where you needed to get rid of controlled substances. You need to send a letter in to the special agent in charge, get approval for destruction in your process, and be able to send it out. Within the new regulation, as long as you meet the new definition of non-retrievable, you can actually do it without sending a letter, which makes it easier and more efficient within each business as well. Last point is that we should continue to waste our unused or partially used controlled substances into the sewer system. It's legal and cheap. What the new regulation is that if we were to collect and divert controlled substances, the quote-unquote pharmaceutical wastage, from the sewer system, we will be saving the environment, helping the future drinking water, so on and so forth. So therefore, there's definitely an option here as well. This goes for a lot of healthcare institutions out there. There's over 5,500 different hospitals within the U.S., and that's not including long-term care facilities and different centers that are out there that are wasting controlled substances down the sink, down the toilet, any other option, as long as it's witness wasted. And it's still legal, it's still cheap, but you want to divert it, so therefore you can get it out of the drinking water completely. There's no wastewater commission out there and no treatment plant that actually can pull these narcotics out of the actual water system, and it still ends up in the drinking water and back in the environment. So what we're going to go over today, we're going to go over exactly what has changed, what the new regulation actually states. We're going to go over what it means to be an authorized collector. One major new way to collect is through the authorized collection. And then lastly, the destruction and disposal options, and talk about the new innovative different ways of going through there. Just wanted everybody to recall that collection, destruction, and removal of controlled substances is now more protected, widespread, and sustainable. We want to create it out there so we have options to be able to do this easier and divert it from the improper hands to the proper hands for destruction. So, what has changed? Way back in 2010, 4 years ago now, the consolidation and implementation of the Secure and Responsible Drug Disposal Act of 2010, the CSA, gave the authority to the DEA to publish and publicize new regulations out into the new rule eliminates existing, specifically in the 21 CFR, the 1307.12 and the 1307.21, which outline requirements for registrant and non-registrant disposal, including return and recall. Both these 1307.12 and 1307.21 were specifically called out in reference letters to the SAC for actual DEA approval and destruction processes. Now, things are going to be different. These got removed, and they're giving you more leeway to be able to get these controlled substances out. They're allowing ultimate users to deliver unused pharmaceutical controlled substances to the appropriate entities for disposal in a safe and effective manner, consistent with effective controls against diversion. The goal of the Disposal Act was to encourage public and private entities with a variety of methods of collection and disposal in a secure, convenient, and responsible manner. They did not want this to be more burdensome and have more paperwork and have more problems than what was before. So this actually gives you a lot better options along the way. These new definitions that I keep speaking of, the ultimate end user. An ultimate end user is a person who lawfully obtained and who possesses a controlled substance for his or her own use, for the use of his or her household, or for an animal owned by him or a member of his or her household. So therefore, it covers the general public, it covers any prescription that's given, it even covers animals in your home, your dogs, your cats, so on and so forth, that would need some kind of substance to be able to have a medical treatment or to keep living forward in a healthy life. Non-retrievable. Non-retrievable is going to be used quite a bit, and what it means is to permanently alter the substance's physical or chemical condition or state through irreversible means, and thereby rendering the substance unavailable and unusable for all practical purposes. A substance is considered non-retrievable when it cannot be transformed to a physical or chemical condition or state at a controlled substance or controlled substance analog. So therefore, you want to be able to chemically alter it or physically alter it enough so it cannot be diverted into the wrong hands. If you can render it non-retrievable, therefore anybody who would potentially steal a container, steal whatever it's going to be mixed in or mixed with, nothing can come of that. They wanted to leave it wide open, so therefore there was no way that people could say, what if this, what if that, but it directly goes into chemical or physical denaturing or changing of the actual substance. Before, there were a lot of limited disposal options, leading to improper disposal solutions. This is a classic example of having a hard time of getting them out of your cabinet upstairs, having a hard time of getting them out of your research facilities, your manufacturing facilities, your drug companies. Trying to get rid of these in a responsible manner was very hard to not only wait for certain days where law enforcement could come around and actually collect it, or if you're at your home, to bring them to a national drug take-back day. Narcotics would sit for an extremely long time. Controlled substances would sit, they would get into the wrong hands. Before, I had a picture up here of a little child pulling some drugs on a table. Classic example of the wrong way that we want to get rid of everything. Getting into the wrong hands of not only your family, but when you're in a research or manufacturing setting, you want to make sure that it gets disposed of properly, so you're not going to be held liable for anything going in the wrong waste stream. There's more open market substances which lead to diversion. There's still a very big market out there for a lot of controlled substances. You can get a lot of money on the open market for it, and we want to make sure we're disposing of it so none of your institutions can be held liable for anything going on out there. Sorry that the graph is a little bit blurry. However, there is a link on the bottom of it. You can go to the exact white paper tomorrow or the day after. But what I'm trying to get at here is that over 70% of obtained controlled substances come from a friend or relative. This study was based back in 2009 and 2010. You can also notice that the red corner of that of the pie is only 18% from a doctor. So less than a quarter of the controlled substances out there actually get prescribed from an actual doctor to the ultimate end user. It's definitely a scary statistic that's out there. However, it's something that we still have to be very cautious of and make sure that we're giving our communities help when they possibly can, and also making sure that as the ultimate end user, we are doing what we're supposed to with the substance as well. When you have the proper disposal, there's definitely less diversion, and with this new reg, it also gives you innovative solutions to suit your needs and to get it done properly. Right out of the Disposal Act from the 2010, the non-medical use of prescription drugs is a growing problem in the United States. I'm sure if this study was done again from the previous slide, you would see numbers even further than what it is. They're easily hidden, poorly policed, and also abused in many different categories, so you want to be cautious about how you're getting rid of them. The regulation can write something, but everyone needs to act to do their part to help the diversion. Now, this is the whole reason why this was written, and this is why the final rule took many, many years to be able to change and actually give you the final rule without all these tweaks and whatnot. The 25 pages of different questions goes into detail about how many respondents were thinking of this way and that way of trying to dispose of a controlled substance, or actually trying to ask questions to get out of this new way of thinking, but they try to be open as liberal or as also as plausible as possible throughout the institutions. To really start looking at it, on your left side, I'm not going to go through this whole entire flow chart here, but everything on the left side in the dark blue goes over the ultimate end user. I'll go over the top part a little bit, which is like the normal patient, you and me. Realistically, we had one way of getting rid of it. There was a take-back day. Now, with the help of some institutions around the areas and registrants, you can process them to an authorized collector, and there's still a take-back day that's out there. So there's a couple different ways. Practitioners and non-practitioners, which include all your retail pharmacies, your hospitals, your clinics with an on-site pharmacy, those are all practitioners. Non-practitioners, manufacturers, distributors, reverse distributors, narcotic treatment centers, so on and so forth. Anybody who has that registration through the DEA can now go under different columns as well. There was 3 different options before that was pretty laid out there, but now there's 4, but there's more options to be able to do it safer. On the reverse distribution part, there's slightly more rules and regulations behind it, so it's more fine-tuned. Sewering, which is a concept that's out there, and it's written in the regulation as well, as destroying controlled substances down the toilet and down the sink, is something that's still legal, but it's something they're definitely looking into getting rid of. And then also with the letter of approval at the bottom. So even out here in Mass, it is still difficult to get a hold on all the regulations. Everyone's still catching up with it. Over the U.S., there's over 60 different regional offices that are trying very hard to get on the same page with the new federal regulation. So things that we're going to go over today, similar to this graph that you see before you, this flow chart, there's things that you can do now. Becoming an authorized collector, we're going to go through that. You can also meet this non-retrievable definition without getting special approval, but there's always a small asterisk, obviously, because everything works a little bit slowly, and you want to make sure you're doing something right. So we always advise also to call your local DEA agency to make sure that everything you're doing is good for the first round, and then after that it should be much, much easier. And then once everybody's in line, it should be a piece of cake after that. So moving on, we're going to talk about the authorized collector. This is a big change that they put into the final rule. This is definitely a higher level look of what it is. I'm not going to specify every little thing that goes along with it, but I'm going to try my utmost to look at it from the macro view. Registrants, anybody out there can apply to become an authorized collector through the DEA office. What you see on your right side is a snapshot of the home page. If you go into DEA Forms and Application, it actually allows for registrants for disposal of controlled substances to modify their current DEA registration to be able to become an authorized collector. The first and foremost thing you should know before considering anything is it's all voluntary. You don't have to do it, and you don't need to educate the public if you decide to do it. There's a couple little caveats there because they don't want to force anybody to doing something that, one, they're not going to be able to handle, or two, that they don't want to get involved with. So they made it voluntary for any registrant to be able to do it. The goal is for the ultimate end users will have more options, locations for disposing of the controlled substances. Think of these locations as voluntary quote-unquote drop-off boxes where ultimate end users can come in, drop off their unused, expired, old controlled substances with no questions asked. A simple, hey, what is it? Perfect. Throw it in there. You're all set. Nice and easy. It's easy to amend your registration to meet the requirements. The DEA has said it before multiple times. There's a bunch of agencies out there already doing it. A lot of the time you'll see popular drugstores. I haven't seen many of the chain stores, Walgreens, CVS, doing it as often, but the mom and pop drugstores that are around and some other types of local places like that. There are some community hospitals in the areas starting to actually change their registration so they can collect it. There's one within the greater Boston area on the East Coast. There's a bunch within each state. You can look at this through this website as well, and you can find the closest one to you, which is definitely an option. And the biggest thing you got to know is do this before you start collecting. Don't think it's a really good idea to start collect and then suddenly run into the problem where you didn't register and didn't modify first. There's definitely a process to go through. It involves so on and so forth. When you become an authorized collector, things you really need to know is safety and security of the container. You got to make sure it's secure in a secure area and secure to the wall or the floor. You want to prevent it from moving and really diverting it to anywhere else. You don't want anybody to steal it. That's the biggest thing that they're actually looking at here. You want a locked container with an inner liner. There's special specifications for the inner liner because it will be mailed back through a reverse distributor or picked up by the reverse distributor. There's going to be a small opening that you want to keep out unwanted diversion and keep in the controlled substances. You want the in but not out. You definitely want that small opening there. You want it labeled for only Schedule 2 through 5 controlled substances. This is very important because in the regulation it states that any kind of Schedule 1 substance is illegal, illicit, and something that no one should have their hands on except law enforcement by confiscating it, and you're not supposed to collect it either. It's quote unquote, it really just doesn't exist out there. So that's something you contact law enforcement to handle, but anything labeled, but the container is really labeled for the Schedule 2 through the Schedule 5 controlled substances that are out there. No inventory of the container needs to be done. When the person walks in, you don't write down what they're putting in there. You basically check to make sure it's not a Schedule 1. You throw it in there, and then you're all set. What needs to happen, we're going to go over the Form 41 later in the presentation, but these inner packaging has special specifications with numbers on them to make sure that you can inventory the package and that you're getting rid of the package properly. You need prompt disposal. You want to make sure that they wanted to make sure that they allowed for flexibility for larger institutions collecting a lot of this to be able to store it for a little while and send it out to lower the cost burden, but also knowing that there's higher security. Long-term care facilities have a little bit more strict guidelines around disposal because of the safety and how easy it is to get in and out of there. They only have 3 business days to actually get a full inner liner out to either the main institution or to be mailed back through a reverse distributor. The benefits of collection. You definitely want to keep the scheduled ones out. It's very hard to do. It's something that when you open this up and you're in a rough part of town, you might see these a little bit more. It's definitely a challenge. Monitoring the collection container. They want it in a secure area where employees have a good sight of it. You don't want it down to your loading dock where you can just pop stuff in and potentially it can actually get stolen off the wall as well. You want it in that secure area. You want to meet all the requirements for the collection container and the inner liner. There's a list of these within the regulation talking about waterproof inner liners, talking about the locked container, how much it needs to be locked, how often does it need to be changed, so on and so forth. That's everything that's in there. Possible solutions or resolutions to this, proper monitoring, and a quick reference to the label on the container is definitely a must. Having the location of the container in an area where there's less traffic but more employees is key to make sure that there are eyes that are tuned in on it. This is really, really important because you want to keep it in a good public area where public can walk in, they know where it is, they know what's going on, but it's very secure and also balanced. The DEA has very quote-unquote loose requirements to make sure that each institution come up with their own solution. This is really the option where it's like, all right, you're collecting it all, but you can go mail back, you can do reverse distributor. There's a couple different options to make sure that each institution can handle it properly. So then lastly, I wanted to talk about the different options for destruction and disposal. Options that stand the other day, last year, take back days, that'll still happen. They can only happen by law enforcement. Law enforcement are the only ones that can set up these days and actually take them back. There's mail back programs that can be sponsored, that can be set up at certain institutions to make sure that you can collect and actually mail back these controlled substances. Online, what you can do is through the DEA as well. This is a picture straight off the DEA site that you want to contact them. They will send you a mailable form and package to be able to put all your controlled substances back in and be able to mail them back to certain places. Sometimes there's a cost, sometimes there's not. There's going to be collection drop-offs. This is all the authorized collection areas that are going to be around in many, many different areas. This is a new option that's really open to the public, easy to use. There's no huge liability from the ultimate end user. You walk in, you drop it off, you walk out of there. One of the big things that constantly pops into my head is patient health information when you're collecting all of this extra material. One thing to note that when you are being an authorized collector, including the inventory that is not going to be taken, they're going to be sent to a reverse distributor, and then they're going to be destroyed from there. All personal health information falls under the reverse distributor, and therefore they're going to take care of it properly, so there's no issue at all there. Reverse distribution. To reverse distribute by the new regulation means to acquire controlled substances from another registrant or law enforcement for the purpose of return or destruction. Reverse, the revision included security, inventory, record keeping, and other requirements and procedures pertinent to persons who reverse distribute. So there are many different companies out there that are willing to reverse distribute, but now there's more specifications around how to get it from the actual institution to their place where they can handle it properly. There's record keeping, a lot more stringent record keeping to make sure that everybody's accurate, and there's a few other requirements there that are also prominent. And then lastly, the entities who reverse distribute must destroy controlled substances received for the purpose of destruction within 30 calendar days of the receipt. Their day one is the day the substances are physically acquired through pickup or delivery. So if you mail them back, it's the day they receive them, and then if day one for them would be the day that they're picking up if they go that route as well. So there's definitely a lot more rules around reverse distribution, but they want to narrow it down, they want to focus it, and they want to make sure that it's legal and being handled properly. And then lastly, there's the on-site destruction. On-site destruction, there is now more options, more innovative ways to be able to destroy these controlled substances on site that I'm going to go into a little bit here. And ultimately, it creates a more easier, quick, simple solution for any registrant that's out there. When you want to get rid of your on-site controlled substances, first thing you got to remember is you don't need the special approval by the SAC. You still need a Form 41 to document it. However, before, when you wanted to control and get rid of controlled substances and you didn't have a reverse distributor, or you didn't want to go that route, you had to destroy them on site, you needed to send a letter in to the special agent in charge, the SAC, to make sure that your process and your procedure was approved by them. Now it doesn't need to happen anymore. For the registrant, you still need to fill out a Form 41, and in a couple slides I'm going to show you the new Form 41 that they have as well, and it lists out a little bit more information and has a little more clarification on exactly what's going on. Second, you need to meet the non-retrievable requirements. Keep thinking in your head for the non-retrievable, chemically or physically changing the controlled substance so it cannot be used again, and you should be all set. And then lastly, we're going to talk a little bit about the pharmaceutical wastage that is now defined. Put the paragraph directly from the reg in here about pharmaceutical wastage, controlled substance dispense for immediate administration pursuant to an order for medication in an institutional setting remains under the custody and control of that registered institutions, even if the substance is not fully exhausted. Therefore, this happens many, many times when you're in a clinical setting or when you're distributing medications in a hospital, in a long-term care facility, in any kind of clinic out there. When you only administer part of the controlled substance, the other part cannot be reused again for a different patient. So therefore, the such remaining substances must be properly recorded, stored, and destroyed in accordance with the DEA regulation that's out there. What's been most popular is sewering over the past decade upon decades upon a long, very, very long time, that they've been basically signing off on it, witness waste, down a toilet, down a sink, you're all set. The idea behind this new reg is to be able to collect it, render it non-retrievable, and then get it out of all these water, of these wastewater environments. One case study that has been popular is that we've had a client that set up these multiple locations within their hospital institution. They set up containers that actually rendered this pharmaceutical wastage non-retrievable per the new regulation, and then started collecting these containers and disposing of them at a very, very low cost, if not any cost at all. It gets it out of the sewer system. There's a small cost in just setting it up and having containers because there's always a cost in the material. But with many options of being able to get rid of it, it's the best way to do it. They didn't use any of the containers that you see here, but these are some of the popular containers that work for many of the institutions out there. Different containers are all unique to each the environment to make sure that you're suiting the needs between the security and safe disposal, meeting the non-retrievable definition, and so on and so forth. Research, manufacturing, a lot of life science pharmaceutical companies out there can consider some of this, but realistically it's just giving more options for you to be able to dispose of your controlled substances that you have within your institution. Not all these will work, not all these are being used. These are just different more popular options that we've seen out there. Wanted to go over the new DEA Form 41. There's new form online. It's a PDF form, so everything in blue you can easily type in on your computer and print out, so it's legible. If any of you are like myself, I have horrendous handwriting, and it's better if I can type everything out and then print it out. It makes it a lot easier. The first section is all the registrant information. Then the section B, which is the important part, which is the actual inventory of what's being used. So most of the time, you're going to run into research, manufacturing, life science, pharmaceutical companies that want to get rid of virgin bottles of expired or old material. This is the form that they should be filled out in and used for the destruction purposes. The second half of it, number 2, is going to be all the collected substances. This is different than section 1. Collection, or number 2, the collected substances, this refers to the authorized collector. What I mentioned before is you don't take an inventory, but you have to mark the bags, and the bags will have a specific identification number for destruction. This is where they want you to collect it. This is how they want you to keep the proper paperwork behind the scenes to make sure you're doing everything properly. Then C, the method of destruction. They were talking about what is actually used for on-site destruction. Does it meet the definition of non-retrievable? It always should, so hopefully it always does, but that's something I always want you to consider and make sure you're meeting. Lastly, D, the sign-off. There's 2 witnesses there. We always highly suggest that you have an employee of the institution that is in a different department, usually a safety department, even security, or someone other than the registrant, and the registrant's department should be signing off and witnessing that this is being disposed of the way it is. Then obviously the registrant should sign off it as well. And then when you have these 2 signatures, you have a copy of this. This is for your own record, and you don't need to send it into the DEA for anything else further than that. When it comes to the pharmaceutical wastage we were talking about before, you do not need a Form 41 for destruction. In the newer age of medications in hospitals and long-term care facilities, there's a lot of machines out there that actually keep the inventory, and there's a new procedure and a new protocol that can be slightly altered to make sure that you're meeting the needs that you need to collect the controlled substances and dispose of them properly. In the new final rule, the DEA will not evaluate, review, or approve the processes or methods utilized to render the non-controlled substances non-retrievable as long as the desired result is achieved. That last section is extremely important, because as long as the desired result is achieved, then you are completely fine. If you can chemically or physically alter the controlled substance non-retrievable, in their eyes, you're fine. If you keep that Form 41 for the registrant, you're perfectly fine as well. They want you to think innovatively, creatively, and also they understand it's going to be different for each registrant that's out there. Everybody's not going to do it the same way. Everybody's going to have alterations to what they want to do because it's going to fit their needs more, and it's going to make it easier. So they want you to be able to meet your needs. Overall, I just want to go through a little summary here. You know, what's changed? Slight alterations to make the regulations more viable, more usable, more really user-friendly, institution-friendly across the U.S. goes into the authorized collector. You know, for your community, they're really going for the national drug take-back days. They're going for more locations like that. They're going for these collector agencies that you can set up within your own institution, monitor, dispose of controlled substances, and also help your community out by being a community player. And there's going to be less diversion. And then lastly, there's more options for disposal with easier options to use. Remember, nothing set out by the DEA for the system. There's no procedure they've sent out. They simply said, meet the definition of non-retrievable, keep your paperwork, and you're all set. Moving forward, we want to make sure that you decide if you want to be a collector and aid your community. This is a voluntary action that you can take moving forward according to the new regulation that's out there. Second, you want to make sure you have a policy or procedure in place to more effectively adhere to the innovative options for controlled substance destruction and disposal. There's no one way out there. You want to meet the needs of your institution and make sure that everybody is meeting those needs according to your new policy and that it reflects the new DEA controlled substance regulation. You definitely want to take advantage of the new regulations to get controlled substances out of your drinking water and the environment. This is the whole entire pharmaceutical wastage concept. You want to be able to pull it out of the environment, so therefore you're already ahead of the game. In many scenarios, there's a lot of different regional wastewater commissions, very popular in cities, that are starting to try and regulate the level of controlled substances that are going down the drain, the different kind of substances that are in the water that they can test for, that they can't test for, and move on from there. Anywhere from pollution prevention authorities, state wastewater authorities, Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, the Bureau's authorities, divisions that could start to regulate all of this could really cause a headache if you don't have a procedure in place already. The bigger good is try and get it out of the drinking water, so every time you're not taking a sip out of your bottle, you're not thinking of the controlled substances that are potentially in there because they keep going down the drain. Overall, we had another client that wanted to get rid of a lot of different types of controlled substances. They understood that reverse distribution can be really costly because reverse distribution can potentially cost a lot because you need witnesses to go along with the controlled substances, you need certain sign-offs, so on and so forth. But there's options for destroying on site that we talked about. And with the client, we discussed with them options for destroying on site. We still got a little assistance from the regional DEA office to make sure that everybody was in the clear. They said everything was fine. And after we destroy these controlled substances from site that show up pretty often, now it goes into a very, very low cost waste stream and can be mixed in there, still taken off site in the proper way, not into the normal trash, but taken off the site in the proper way at a much lower cost to be able to save money and do it the proper way. And with that, I'm looking for any questions and answers. Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right, great. It looks like we already have a lot of questions coming in, but just as a reminder, anybody who has a question can ask it in the question or chat pane on your right. Just as a reminder, if we don't have time to get to all of your questions, we will answer them in an email after the webinar. So feel free to ask. Your question will definitely get answered. The first question, someone wants to know what your recommendations are for the inner liner for the receptacles.
Within the regulation, there is a lot of specificity around waterproof bags, around specific liners. They didn't give anybody a manufacturer's name brand liner. It's whatever you can put into the outer container, seal very easily, not open. Again, it's basically tamper-proof, and if it does get open again, which it shouldn't, there should be some kind of way to negate that actually happening. So these inner liners should be able to be placed into bags or be able to be taken back from the reverse distributor. So there's no specific manufacturing on it, but it's usually waterproof, waterproof, sealable, and non-alterable after it leaves site.
Great. The next question, someone wants to know if they can ask someone to remove the drugs out of plastic bottles before placing them into the collection box.
They can, however, you don't have to. A lot of the times, the majority of the bottles are smaller. However, we all know that there's a lot of larger containers out there. If the container will not fit into the setup that you would have on your site for being an authorized collector, something on your sign saying as easy as please put into a plastic bag, please put into something that'll be able to be put in here to make it easier is the best way to do it. They don't want any employees of the institutions to be able to transfer it because that's an option for diversion as well, so we want to be careful there's less handling. But it's definitely a suggestion for a sign that if it cannot fit into this container, please use plastic bag found here on the right, dump them in, throw them in, and then you're all set. But actually emptying the container in there, really trying to stay away from.
Great. The next question, someone wants to know, take-back days are just for consumers or end users only, correct? Not businesses?
Can you say that one more time?
So they want to know, basically they want to know if take-back days are for businesses. They were under the impression that it's just for consumers and end users.
The take-back days are for the ultimate end users. They are not intended for the businesses. I have not seen any business use them like end users do. That's something I'm definitely going to note down and make sure that that's crystal clear, but from my knowledge, it's only the ultimate end users.
Okay, thanks. The next question, what are some of the known methods to render a controlled substance non-retrievable?
There are many different methods out there. Some use chemical, some use different types of solidifiers out there. There's a lot of different methods to either chemically or physically change it to be able to render it non-retrievable. In the past, a lot of waste was used. There's certain types of waste products that already come from your institution that could be a viable source of being able to be used to meet the definition of non-retrievable, and making sure that it's in those containers and making sure that it's used in a safe way, then it's perfectly fine.
Great. Someone wants to know if following DEA regulations for sewering is in violation of the EPA or other agency regulations.
This is where there's a classic clash in between the right hand and the left hand of the government. Within many of these agencies, they live in different branches of the government, and there's no reference in between one or the other. In this regulation, it doesn't say EPA says this, so we say this. It doesn't say that. It's something where, like when I was starting to talk about the wastewater commission and the wastewater authorities out there, there's nothing in there about sewering. However, in the new DEA regulation, there's nothing in about sewering from the Wastewater Commission. However, you still need to reference the other institution and the other regulatory statutes to make sure that you're on the page with both sides of it. Sewering's been a very popular option for a very, very long time within the healthcare network. It's been deemed perfectly legal, but some of the more stringent areas are starting to get hit with it a little bit more. EPA, I believe, is going to start tackling it more. But to the question, there's no specific citation from one institution to the other in the government.
Great, thank you. Someone wants to know if a hospital has to fill out a DEA Form 41 for on-site destruction of outdated compounded controlled substances like PCAs.
In a lot of these cases, we find that reverse distribution is a popular way to do it. However, when you do it on site, yes, a Form 41 should be used because it's still under the control of the registrant within the pharmacy or inside the compound pharmacy, so the forms should be filled out and kept track of. The idea is that if the DEA were to audit your program and actually check in to make sure that you're doing with the controlled substances what you're supposed to be doing, everything must meet each other. Your inventory must meet your out inventory, your reverse distribution numbers should meet where it's all coming from, and so on and so forth.
Okay. Someone wants to know if incineration is considered a viable means once the controlled substance is collected, and if so, can this waste, once separated and documented, be placed in a chemo waste or pathological box marked for incineration?
I'm going to double check on my answer. However, incineration is mentioned in the regulation. I believe, I'm going to double check on this to make sure that it's done through RCRA incinerators and through chemical incinerators. However, when it's deemed non-retrievable, it does fall out of the controlled substance category. It shouldn't be placed into chemo or regulated medical waste bins, the biological bins, because you're just deferring it into a different waste stream, which is not the most popular. You want to make sure you're keeping your waste separated for cost purposes and also regulatory purposes. And it depends on what kind of chemical or physical properties you're using to make sure that you're meeting the non-retrievable standard, doesn't violate anything going into those containers. So I wouldn't recommend it, but I'm going to double check on the specific incineration needs of it.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to ask one more question. We still have a lot of questions coming in. We will answer those all via email sometime tomorrow after we have a chance to go through them and answer all of them. So your questions will be answered, but just one more on the webinar today. Someone wants to know if sharps containers by definition are considered irretrievable.
By definition, no. Trying to meet the non-retrievable definition is by physically or chemically altering it. If you simply put in a controlled substance within a sharps container, if the sharps container were ripped off the wall, altered in any way, and you pull it off, the controlled substance that is in it is still not met the new definition of chemical or physical altering of the substance, so therefore it does not meet the need. Some of the containers that I showed earlier in the presentation, if you look closely at it when you get it tomorrow, there is a sharps container on there. However, there's ways of being able to put a substance in there to meet the definition of non-retrievable, so therefore if the container was altered in any way, that it would still meet the definition and no one could simply pull it out and use it in its form.
Great. All right, so we're going to close out our Q&A session right now. Mike, if you want to flip to the next slide. So as I said before, it looks like we're out of time. All your questions will be answered in an email sent out sometime tomorrow. You'll also receive a copy of the presentation along with a recording of the presentation. The email will also have a link asking you to fill out a survey, asking you to rate this webinar. If you could please fill that out, that'd be very helpful to our team. We have several upcoming webinars, including one on the Clean Air Act. You can find these webinars on our events page at www.triumvirate.com/training/events. I will also send you that link in the email, so no need to write it down right now. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.
Excellent. Thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thank you.